One of the things I always was complimentary about your style with, because again, this isn't something that every in-game leader has. Like, there's some in-game leaders where they're amazing at tactics and stuff like that, but as a result, you become like a slave to their system. You must do every single part of what they want, otherwise it won't work. And then at the end, they'll just say, well, you didn't do what I told you to do. One thing it seems, kind of like what you're answering there, I know from talking to you, is like you're saying, when you think about your star players, you're thinking about, right, what does he like to do? Like, where is he successful? Like, what is he comfortable? And then it's like, this is one of the reasons I've always speculated as to why you like to sometimes have a loose element in the game, is because then you can read, right, here's where I can set him up for an awesome duel at somewhere. Maybe it could be like the mid on Mirage or something, or I can isolate this area on Cash and let's just let my best player take a close range duel with like a guy who's just an okay player with an M4. Like, we're going to win that. And your philosophy, I remember talking about on the maps that are very loose, like the ones I'm talking about, Mirage, Cash, your philosophy was like, if I can set that up and we can just keep hitting that over and over again and we're just winning 5, 6, why would I stop? Why wouldn't I just keep milking it till that's dry and then we'll try something else? Like, it's because, you know, another thing about in-game leaders is if you're a really great mind, that can become ego. There's an in-game, I used to tell Happy this, there's a star player ego, there's an in-game leader ego where you also want to win and you want everyone to know it was you who called the most brilliant strat, like, oh, this rotation. So what do you think about that angle? Because that's kind of like, it's not really talked about much, the idea of how you set your stars up or how you even just turn them loose sometimes.
I mean, I think it's part of in-game leader job is to always be in the background, especially if you win. I think, honestly, here with Mouse, compared to all of my teams, I got a lot more credit than I've done in FaZe Clan or whatever, because the pieces I had in my team, right, is different. But in FaZe Clan was often, if it went good, somebody went off. But nobody is watching the demon see how he went off. Was it because he was trading good? Was it because the way we took map control, he could backstab or stuff like that, right? And I think it never really goes to my mind. I obviously have confidence in myself when I'm doing good calls or finding good strategies. But it's about winning, and I don't really care if I'm playing good or bad or if I get the credit or not. As long as my team is happy, because the moment the team is happy, I know everything else is safe. It doesn't matter about criticism from the community or the casters. But if my team trusts me, I know I can do whatever I need to do in the team, and I call whatever, and everybody will follow the lead, right? But the problem obviously comes if the critics goes to the players and they start saying, well, this karrigan guy's not doing good, and they start doubting me, then it's hard to win that trust, right? And that was one of the issues I had in FaZe, where they told me after we won Sydney, they wanted to replace me. And at that moment, I knew everything from now on would be evaluated. If we lost that game, the pressure would mount on me, right? So at that moment, once you get to hear this, that you kind of on the line, as an in-game leader, that's very tough, and I think nobody's really gonna come through it on the other side really, really safe, because you start second-guessing yourself, right? And in mouse spots, I know I have to trust more the players, the organization, the coach we had. We don't have it anymore, but when it comes down to that, I think I don't really care about my ego in that way. Often, I obviously have one impact in the game, but for me, it's impact how we move as a team and how we move forward, and not about anything else.
This is obviously a brutal question, but listen, mate, I made a whole career off these. Right? Obviously, one thing fans will never get, it's a good fucking great statement, isn't it, Vlagia? That's it, right? One thing fans will never understand is every pro player, the reason they sound in interviews like they give an excuse, is like, oh, you know, we just lost like an equal in the game, or if we'd have done this right, is because really, with their mindsets, like, they can be very fragile. So, like, one round can just totally change, not just that game, but the next 2 months. So, obviously, in your career, the one everyone thinks about is if you win one more round, you would have won the Boston Major. If you'd won the Boston Major, right, in theory, maybe the other tournaments could go the same. But, like, don't you think that would have changed this angle of, like, if the players trust you? If they, like, that'd create a very special memory in their mind they could at least go back to, right?
Yeah, I think yes and no. I think it was more, I've said that multiple times now, I think more was the Katowice final right after the Boston made that hurt a lot.
Ah, okay.
There was where Flusher went off.
Yes.
And we kind of lost in the same way, in a random way, where we sit after the game like, how did this happen, right? I think the biggest issue was us. Like, if you look at those 6 months, right, from before Major to Katowice, we were like in 10 finals or something like this. Yep. We won 5 of them. And what more can you expect, right? Because you lose to 5 different teams who has a peak one tournament, disappears completely, right? And that happens in Counter-Strike. But if you're consistently top 4 in the final, you should not lose confidence by losing some stupid finals, because that's going to happen.
Yes.
Sometimes there is luck involved in CS. One key round, like you say, but sometimes it comes down to 4 key rounds where we misplayed or pressure mounts or we played bad tactical or whatever, right? But I think the main issue was in FaZe was when Olaf went out of the lineup, we stagnated. We didn't know how long time we would stay with Exist. It was 1 to 2 months. Okay, we practice a little. You don't improve as a team. We change roles. Then Olaf comes back. 2 days later, he's not coming back. Then we get Kroman in. Again, we don't practice. I think at that moment...
Brazil.
Yeah, we win Brazil somehow. We won Sydney somehow, There was still confidence in the team, but we didn't move forward. Like, we didn't have a new playbook. The roles changed so much during those tournaments and the way we played CS, right? And I think if you're out of a team and you don't move forward for 5-6 months, the meta changes way too much, man. What worked a few months ago won't work now if you come back in the lineup. And if Olaf's break was depending on if you won Katowice or the major, I can't answer that. It could have been a factor, but I still think with so good results, it shouldn't have been a factor. If he needed a break, he probably took it anyway. If he would have been number 1 in the world, because we were still number 1 in the world until April or May or something like this, until he left the team. So I think that was the issue, and also Robin wasn't really coaching us so much. So I was sitting alone with 4 big players, and I had to kind of coach them. And if there was something going in the team, he wasn't there to have my back to relax the guys and stuff like that. I have talked with them already, Robin, and back then, that he wasn't there really mentally because something in his family as well. So I was left deep in shit in FaZe. Like, basically, I was all alone with big players, not big egos in that way, but if they want to have something to say, they could say it. I didn't really have someone to back me up. And I also think Guardian mentioned that we as a team didn't stand together. They didn't try to help me. How could we improve the meta, right? Because often you need someone else to kind of guide you in a way as an in-game leader, because sometimes you lose track, and especially with stand-ins, because I play to win the tournament with a stand-in. I don't play our normal things. I come up with new ideas with a stand-in because Kroman is not an Olaf player, so suddenly I was playing Olaf role doing a tournament without practice. It was something like that because I knew it didn't work with him in that role. So stuff like that also made me out of my comfort zone, but I just did it for the tournament instead of thinking about my stats or how I could play better in Victory. I just did everything for us to win those tournaments.
And there you can see actually how much impact you can have with the style of in-game leading that you have.
Yes.
You basically have like Chrome and you get him in your team. I think, how much days did you have with him?
3 days
Brazil?
practice.
3 days practice.
That's insane.
You guys win Brazil. You win another tournament. And now imagine you had a in-game leader like Existence was, for example, a guy who's like way more strategical and like set plays way more instead of this loose and micromanaging style. It would be impossible to win a tournament, I personally think.
Yeah, agree.
Not impossible, obviously, anything can happen, but I believe like the chances would be way lower. So just credits to you.
When you say that, like, yeah, go on.
It was a really strange scenario, right? Because I was like, okay, let's just try to. I have no idea about Chrome. I never met him. I have never seen him play. He played a heroic. We saw his stats. Okay, he's available. Let's just take him for. I think it was 2 tournaments actually. We had 2 or 3 days practice to ECS. Went to tournament, kind of shit the bed there, and we had to go straight to Brazil. And we had to decide during the ECS tournament, did we want to go with Chroman or not? But we couldn't find others, so we went with Chroman. And I think the first map we played in official, I just swapped him with my position. I was like, okay, this guy's going in first. He has insane mechanics, but his awareness and communication is not on point. So what we're going to do is just put him in together with Rain, so with the Norwegian combo going in with really good aim. And I was just playing kind of support role, knowing all the nades, because as an in-game leader, you kind of know all nades on the map. You know how you want this position to be played, right? So I just start doing that. So I was like in-game leading lurking. And it was so strange to play that role because it was so different for me, but it worked in that matter that we were unpredictable, and obviously it was easy for Chromatus to rush in a Mirage. Execute, he runs first, right? There's no decision to be made. It's just your pathway, how you clear sight. And everybody with good mechanics and pro scene knows how to do that. So it was difficult, but also fun and experimental. But it also hurt me in the end because then I had to go back in my old role again, and it just changes everybody how they see the game, right? And like I said, I just do everything to win with the piece I have at this moment, and not about how do we win a tournament in 8 months. It's not about make it short term, because that's about confidence in the team.
That's also when you said before, like not big egos, but like obviously they had big voices. When I say like star player ego, I don't necessarily mean it's a bad thing, by the way. Like sometimes I want my star player to have a big fucking, he's the best player. Like, I want him to think he's right and he knows what he's doing and he knows that he wants to be put in this situation. But the problem is in your team, in that FaZe clan in particular, because obviously we'll go to some of the other teams later, on this FaZe clan in particular, every player you were playing with in that lineup in a past team was like the best player. So they're used to being in a position where if they have an idea, well, of course they're going to listen to me. I'm the best player. So if you have 4 people like that, first of all, you can never make all 4 happy at all times. You're always having to do some compromise. Someone's going to have to sacrifice. As you said, essentially, the obvious thing to do is just sacrifice even more yourself. But then that can hurt because since you want some of them to just focus on what they're doing, they're not going to even notice what you're sacrificing sometimes. So then they're going to think, well, I played great. Oh, it was him. Look, he fucking sucked in the game. It's like, brother, I'm giving everything to make you good. Like, I know I don't, like, obviously you don't want to be egotistical and tell them all the time, look what I'm doing for you. Because that sounds fucked up too, but it's why when they can turn real quick, right? Like, one night it can just be over.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I also learned some of FaZe, right? Because I was always playing with FAMAS or SMG, basically the Sanji style. And sometimes really playing alone on a side B Mirage, it's okay to SMG, but if you never have an AK, I dropped AK every round to Nico, Rain, or Olaf when I was CT. Because I felt like, okay, they just do instant one-tap, right? And then maybe I'll use a spray, but sometimes it's way easier to hold a side with an AK because you kill the first guy faster than an M4, right? Small stuff like this, I stopped doing in mouse because I also need to perform at my spot in my positions because I can't sacrifice myself so much like I did in FaZe. I felt in the end I wasn't even playing like in that matter, right? I was trying to make the right calls. I focused way too much on that instead of focusing on myself. And when it really hurt me was when I went to Envy for like these 2 months. I couldn't get out of that loop of, even if it had not the same players at all,
right?
I was still in this sacrifice mentality. And by playing in Envy, I really realized you cannot get to the top level. You still have this mentality. You need also to make sure you need to work a little more on your individual game. You need to make sure you're not always sacrificing for the team, but also set yourself up, because I can also play good in specific situations and clutches and stuff like that. So I don't always need to die first. So I feel like that's something I learned in interface as well. I felt the pressure was mounting so much, and I want a team and the players to perform so good that I sacrificed myself way too much in the end. So like you always take something out of something bad, right? You learn stuff from it and you know how to improve it in for the future. And I feel like I did that after getting benched in FaZe, that I wasn't really myself the last 6 months because of all the things that was happening and all the sacrifice I did as a player, right?
But truly speaking, like you're trying to perform like now individually better and whatsoever. Do you think it affects your calling, or because I personally think that? Well, go ahead. That's the way.
I think it does to a certain degree. That, I mean, my team is always saying I'm really good at finding gaps. I mean, so I'm playing very aggressive. I get in position. I know exactly what I want my teammates to do, what time they should attack a different place of the map if I'm alone. Because I can analyze really fast what's happening on the map, if they're stacking or what setup it is. And if I perform good in Vigil, I get those frags and it turns so fast, right? Sure. If I go aggressive outside as T, nuke alone, and I kill the guy outside playing aggressively, the whole map just opens up for my teammates, right? If I die, they clear outside, they stack A and ramp, and they start blocking. So yeah, I mean, it affects my calling in that way that I can call on myself more, and going out first, clearing angles way better than I did. So it affects me in a way, but not my confidence as a caller, how I read the game. It's more about if I get that opening for my team, instead of dying getting traded, that just changes everything in execute, right?
I mean, it will also give you confidence in further calling, like for during the game. When you win aim battles, you know how you can level your opponent.
Yeah, if you have 0-11 and you're doing calls and everything goes wrong and you don't get a kill, so obviously it's tough, right? I've tried also that a few times.
One last question to that. Since you're like most of the time the entry fragger first going in, and let's say it's X or Nix, do you, in this lineup, I'm assuming in FaZe the people were talking way more in clutch rounds, but do you like still talk and make calls for your team when you're dead, or do you let them play and Chris takes, for example, the lead with an AWP or whatever?
that's something that my team wants to do more in the beginning. Because I was in phase, and when I was dead, I was only saying about grenades time, what I saw on other monitors.
Yeah.
I was not saying what to do. In Mouse, we discussed after a few months that I should take more over because of the way I can lead and I set up nades and people can do the executes, right? But I've always been a leader. I know what nades I can throw and how I set my teammates up, right? So if I'm not going in first, if I'm going first, I know exactly what my teammate needs to throw for me for it to be a perfect execute, or I can set them up, right? So sometimes I do it, but also feel like in practice I won't do that much because I want people to learn to take initiative to read the game themselves. So when it gets close to tournaments, I start talking more, calling more, but always do a lot of dead talk. I get opportunities to teammates. You have 2 smokes, 2 flashes, stuff like that. I say so they can create the go themselves, because it's really hard for me to say how a guy should go in on B Inferno in a 4-on-4. If he wants to go before the flash, or he wants to go before smokes, or they want to do a Molotov execute, it's up to the players themselves. So Chris is helping there, but also feel like Raps has learned a lot over the last year to take more initiative in this lineup that he previously did in his old mouse was, right? Because he was the rookie. Now he's kind of the star player and one of the most experienced players in the lineup, right? Together with me and Chris. So he's taking more initiative in that way, and I think there's a good mixture of me dead talking, but also Chris and Robin having some ideas during the game.